My Discord server challenged me to beat Modern with Vannifar. As I'm one of those people who loves to challenge myself with difficult tasks in the Modern format, I decided it would be perfect for a video. I also want to say the feedback for these types of videos have been very positive, so I'll be doing them once a week from now on. Subscribe so you get notified when I upload these style of videos. Our first build comes from a suggestion by Freddy as he put his list in my Discord as a starter for this journey. This deck is built around Vannifar. Vannifar lets us sacrifice another creature we control to search our library for a creature with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus we sacrificed. This means we can sacrifice a 1-drop to get Corridor Monitor out of our deck. That untaps the Vannifar, which we can then sacrifice again to get Extraction Specialist. That gets back the Monitor from our graveyard to untap the Vannifar. This we can then sacrifice to get us Breaching Hippocamp, which then untaps the Vannifar, which we can then sacrifice that to get Kiki Jiki to copy the Corridor Monitors and win the game. While this combo sounds complicated, hopefully the demonstration on screen helped, as all it really takes is Vannifar plus a 1-drop. This combo is powerful when we can actually activate the Vannifar, but with Summoning Sickness it is definitely weak as it allows the opponent so many opportunities to find a removal spell. This video wouldn't be possible without Tivar. Tivar's static ability lets us activate Vannifar the turn it comes down. This genuinely is a game changer because we can have some very explosive turns, and with this list I thought it would be perfect to start off our match. To start off the first match, game 1 we have a great turn 2 Tivar hand if we can draw an untapped mana off the top. The opponent starts off the game with Fervent Champion and attacks in for 1. With a Vannifar off the top, we have all the tools that we need to beat the opponent, we just need some mana. Now while I would normally play the Birds of Paradise here, because the opponent has an Inspiring Vantage, I'm like 90% sure they're going to have a Lightning Bolt, so I'd much rather Prismatic Ending the Fervent Champion, and then play the Triumph and the Birds of Paradise next turn so that they play off curve with their removal spells. Potentially we can get punished by this line because the opponent just plays their land and passes back. We do find the third land as well, so if they didn't have a removal spell, Tivar would be on the table here. The opponent is clearly on a slow draw though because they just play a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker and pass back. So with the Prismatic Ending off the top, we can now play our Tivar, untap the Birds of Paradise, Prismatic Ending the Goblin Shaman, and then play our land tap to save as much life as possible, and set up a kill for next turn with Vannifar. Things are looking so great for us because the opponent just uses 4 mana to cast an Ahiri and pass back the turn, so now we can play our Prime Speaker Vannifar. It has haste because of the Tivar, we activate it to get the Corridor Monitor, but the opponent concedes the game before we can execute the whole combo. Going into boarding, the opponent is clearly on a Stoneforge Mystic deck because they had both Fervent Champion and then Ahiri, so I board in all the cards that remove creatures. Going into game 2, I have a very risky hand, but I think with both a Solitude that I can evoke, and we're on the draw, we have loads of hits for land, and we also have 2 mana dorks in hand, so the opponent needs 2 removal spells. I think this hand is completely fine. While we whiff our first draw, let's play one of our mana dorks and hope they don't have removal. In hindsight, I think it's a mistake to get a basic forest here. Overgrown Tomb is way better because obviously we want to be able to cast the Tivar if they kill the Birds of Paradise. But with another Tivar off the top and the opponent getting a Caldra complete with the Stoneforge Mystic, the best thing we can do is play our Noble Hierarch and kill the Stoneforge Mystic. After exiling the Stoneforge, the opponent plays their land and slams Sword of Fire and Ice. Now I almost concede the game because Fervent Champion allows you to equip Sword of Fire and Ice for free because equipping costs 2 less. This is terrible for us, and we're going to have to chump block and then hope we draw a land for this Tivar. Now the opponent clearly doesn't want me to be able to play Magic because they slam the Solitude and we're basically dead from this spot. To make things even worse, in game 3 we started off with a very good opening hand with both a Birds of Paradise, an Eladamri's Call to find the Vannifar, and an interactive spell in Prismatic Ending. To top it off, we have a Knight of Autumn to destroy an equipment. With the opponent starting off with the Ragavan and us finding a Birds of Paradise off the top, we can Prismatic Ending the Ragavan and put them in an awkward spot. Until they slam a Fury, and now we have no white mana, and we lose the game because of Mana Screw. Fury is definitely a powerful Magic the Gathering card, and we're gonna have to concede this match. Going into the next round, we're on the play and we have a decent opening hand. All we're doing here is praying that the opponent does not have a removal spell because then we can get down a turn 2 Tivar. And today is clearly our lucky day because the opponent just plays a Dragon Rage Channeler and passes back. What's even better is we find a Giver of Runes off the top, so now we can play the Tivar, untap the Noble Hierarch, and then play the Giver of Runes. Giver of Runes is a really good draw here because we can activate it with haste because of the Tivar, so it's forcing the opponent to remove it. What's even better is we can then reanimate the Giver of Runes with Tivar if they do use a removal spell. And that's what they do. They use a Pyrite Spellbomb to deal 2 damage to the Giver of Runes. As it cannot protect itself, I just give the Noble Hierarch protection and they attack the Tivar for 1 damage. And like an absolute beast, we find Prismatic Ending off the top. So now we can minus the Tivar, get back the Giver of Runes, Prismatic Ending the Dragon Rage Channeler, and then have Eladamri's Call for the end step so that we can get the Vannifar out of our deck. And as Tivar can plus on the Noble Hierarch, we now have access to 4 mana. Now the opponent does have a Wrenn and 6 which pings the Tivar unfortunately, so that will die and we now don't have access to haste. The opponent then fetches a basic mountain in their main phase and moves to their end step, so we get the Vannifar out of our deck. Now it's very awkward here if the opponent has a lightning bolt because they can bolt my Giver of Runes and then ping my Noble Hierarch. So here I decide to play the Tivar pre-combat, then go to combat and attack the Wrenn and 6. If they do want to bolt my Giver of Runes, then I can get it back with the Tivar. But here my main concern was if I attack with the Giver of Runes and they bolt my Noble Hierarch, then I'm out of mana. It turns out that the opponent actually had Unholy Heat in their hand, so they get rid of the Giver of Runes, and then now we can get it back with the Tivar and still have the activated ability up. From here we pass back the turn, the opponent pings the Tivar, plays a Tarmogoyf, plays an Urza's Saga, and ships back the turn. Having access to Prismatic Ending, we can get rid of the Tarmogoyf, attack the Wrenn and 6 for 1, play this Birds of Paradise, and set up for the Prime Speaker Vannifar next turn. It's been very unfortunate that we haven't been able to hit our 3rd land, as maybe we would have just won this game because of the Giver of Runes and Vannifar. After playing the Vannifar and passing back the turn, the opponent has no answer for Vannifar from the Urza's Saga trigger, so they just attack him for 4 with Lifelink and Trample. As we get to untap with the Vannifar, we can now activate it and win the game with the combo. It's really satisfying to be able to beat Jund in game 1 against all their removal, but it's very important that we had access to Giver of Runes and both Tivar this game because we got tons of value with the Tivar and the Giver of Runes protected our creatures a lot. Now the problem is, going into game 2, we were too slow being on the draw and they had a turn 1 Ragavan. With us having access to no removal, they just killed both of our blockers and kept bashing in with the Ragavan and put on a ton of pressure. And then in game 3, after mulliganing down to 5, it felt almost hopeless because we had a terrible opening hand, so I just conceded because I knew that there were loads of changes to this deck that I needed to make. After dropping from this league, it was time to change the deck. There was a key problem that happened in both of my losses, and that was that in the early game the deck was very weak. After looking at my options, I decided I needed a better 2-drop that not only blocks Ragavan, but is a great reanimation target for Tivar. This is when I found Coiling Oracle. Being a 2-drop that can potentially ramp us and also trade with Ragavan is what the game plan needed. And with the addition of an extra Noble Hierarch in my collection and 4 Coiling Oracle, it was time to challenge the modern format again with this deck list. To start the first round, with this deck list we have a great turn 1 Noble Hierarch hand with the Coiling Oracle to follow up with if the opponent has a removal spell. From here, the opponent has a turn 1 Thoughtseize which takes my Prime Speaker Vannifar to try and stop us from comboing. It makes me a bit worried that the opponent's on some sort of scam deck, so we follow up with the Coiling Oracle and that hits a land, so we can now play our other fetch land and hold up Eladamri's Call on their end step. Now things aren't looking too good for us when the opponent uses a Fury to wipe the board and then they use Feign Death so that it comes back with a +1/+1 counter and comes back to the battlefield. As I'm not sure what I meant to Eladamri's Call for, I decide to just get 2 Triumphs and I'm planning to play my Prime Speaker Vannifar next turn so that I'm hoping that they don't have a removal spell as they've used a lot of resources. If they didn't have this Fury on the table, I definitely would have Eladamri's called for a second Vannifar, but here because of the Fury dealing 8 damage per turn, I really only have 1 more untap step. The opponent starts off their turn with a Thoughtseize, which obviously takes the Eladamri's Call, and they attack him with the Fury, and just pass back, so now we can combo kill the opponent. We sacrifice Giver of Runes to get Corridor Monitor, which untaps the Vannifar. We can then sacrifice the Monitor to then get a 3-drop, which reanimates the Monitor. We then sacrifice our 3-drop, get a 4-drop, which untaps the Vannifar, then we sacrifice the 4-drop to get the 5-mana Kiki Jiki out of the deck to then kill the opponent. There's nothing else the opponent can really do but concede the game. As I'm scared of Dauthi Voidwalker, I bring in 4 Prismatic Ending for 2 Noble Hierarchs as they're bad against Fury, and I also take out a Fury and a Solitude because they are card disadvantage. There's a good argument to keep Solitude in because it exiles the Grief, so then you can prevent the scam, but I'm just not a big fan of it. Going into game 2, we have a really bad opening 7 with bad mana, so we're gonna mulligan to 6. Fortunately, our 6 is very strong with 1, 2, 3, 4, all we're doing is hoping to draw a land. There is a good argument to bottom the Restoration Angel because you want to have your 3rd land drop for Tivar, but I think that the opponent is just going to take the best cards from our hand with Thoughtseize anyways. The opponent does Thoughtseize and takes the Tivar from my hand, so now we're heavily leaning on this Coiling Oracle hitting the table to make sure that we keep the cards flowing. With Vannifar off the top, we're just going to play our Giver of Runes and pass back the turn. Now the opponent just Fatal Pushes the Giver of Runes and passes back without hitting their second land drop. So this heavily implies to me that they have Fury in their hand, because I feel like they would only keep a 1-land hand if they could scam a Fury, as Fury is so powerful against our deck. That aside, we can get the Coiling Oracle down and we hit an island. There also could be an argument to wait one turn before playing the Coiling Oracle, as we now don't have black mana to cast the Tivar, so we need a 4th land off the top to either cast this Restoration Angel or the Vannifar. But things seem to be terrible for us when the opponent finds a Grief off the top so that they can scam it and take both my Vannifar and my Tivar. Now they have a 4/3 menace creature on the board that we can't remove, and we find another Tivar off the top, which isn't great because now we need to find our 4th land still. What makes things even worse is that the opponent follows up with the Ragavan after I attacked in for 1, so I made a huge mistake attacking with the Coiling Oracle. That actually exiles our Corridor Monitor off the top, removing one of our combo pieces from the deck. With a Noble Hierarch off the top, I'm feeling extremely hopeless because I assume that they have a Fury in their hand so that they can wipe our mana, and then we have nothing to flicker with Restoration Angel. But fortunately, the opponent just plays a Blood Moon and attacks in for 4. Now this isn't terrible for us because we get our white mana from the Noble Hierarch, and having these 2 creatures on the board around and 4 mana makes me feel like it's possible to win this game. With an Eladamri's Call off the top of the deck, the best thing we can do is attack in for 2 and pass back the turn. Now the opponent starts off their turn with one of the biggest punts I've seen in a while on Magic Online. They use Sheoldred's Edict to make me sacrifice a creature token. Well, I have no creature tokens on the board, so that isn't going to do anything. This is really good for us because now we can play Restoration Angel and flicker our Coiling Oracle. Now, I've decided to double block the Grief because it's way harder to block, as well as Ragavan costs 2 mana per turn if they want to dash it, and we just gotta hope they don't hit anything impactful. Now they do hit another combo piece off the deck, the Hippo, so it's actually getting very difficult to combo with Vannifar if we do manage to get it on the table. Now, we do manage to find a land off the top and a Prismatic Ending, so I think the best thing we can do here is just Prismatic Ending the Blood Moon and pray that the opponent does not have a way to kill this Coiling Oracle so that they can't dash the Ragavan and kill my face. I don't think it's very realistic to just play my land and pass back here, because we're just not going to win this game if we keep letting them draw cards, because their deck will function better than ours with this Blood Moon down. And somehow they don't have the removal spell to then dash, they just play a Seasoned Pyromancer and discard a Ragavan and a Feign Death, and then Thoughtseize away the Tivar. I'm really surprised here that they took the Tivar instead of the Eladamri's Call, because I feel like the Tivar has way less impact on this board than the Eladamri's Call, but it is what it is. Now we can fetch a basic forest, use the Eladamri's Call to get Extraction Specialist to put a lifelink creature on the board, and we still have to pray that they don't find a removal spell. With the land off the top, I slam the Extraction Specialist and get back the Giver of Runes, and we gotta pray that they don't find anything. The opponent takes a draw step and instantly goes to combat, and attacks with everything. I was really worried about a removal spell, which is why I chump blocked with the Noble Hierarch. It might be incorrect, but I was just worried that they would kill the Extraction Specialist or what it's blocking before damage to try and trick me into a win. But they just have a Marsh Flats in hand, so I guess it was a mistake. I fetch on their end step, and like an absolute beast we find Felidar Guardian in our draw step. This means we can attack with the Extraction Specialist and then flicker it with the Felidar Guardian, meaning we can now attack with the Giver of Runes as well as reanimate another creature. Now using the Felidar Guardian, I get back the Coiling Oracle, which finds an Overgrown Tomb off the top, so we put it into play tapped. But unfortunately, just like how I was a beast, the opponent is also a beast because they found Fury off the top of the deck to now essentially kill me. What they're going to do here is kill the Giver of Runes, and then I can now not attack with Protection from Red to get through their creatures, so they'll just have blockers which wreck me in combat. Nope, instead, the opponent deals 1 damage to Giver of Runes, so I guess they misread the toughness, so now I can give the Extraction Specialist Protection from Red, the Giver of Runes doesn't die from the Fury, and we only lose the Coiling Oracle, which couldn't attack or block anyways. I'm really surprised by my opponent's play, but now we essentially steal a win. And that's exactly what happens. They found a Terminate off the top, but it doesn't matter, they're at 1 life, so we win. Now, technically I've completed this challenge, but I'm not satisfied because the opponent was a paid actor and made multiple mistakes which led us to win the match. So that leads us on to the final chapter. I decided to make one more change to the list, and that was to add an Elish Norn and a Knight of Autumn back into the deck, because both Zealous Conscripts and the Fury just wasn't doing anything valuable for us in all of the games that I played. So after I added the Elish Norn to the 75, it was time to play our final match. Going into the final match, we're on the play. Game 1 we have to mulligan a clunky opening 7, but keep a nice 6 and bottom a Triome. Starting off the game, we play the Birds of Paradise with the Breeding Pool and see what the opponent is doing on their turn. Now clearly, it is going to be a tough matchup because the opponent reveals a Curse Catcher to their land and passes back. Generally, Merfolk seems like a bad matchup because they have Island Walk creatures, and because we need islands in play to cast the Vannifar, it's going to be an uphill battle for us as we're never going to be able to block. And this shows here because the opponent plays a turn 2 Lord of Atlantis and then gets in for 2 damage with Island Walk, so I just fetch a Triome and we find a Tivar off the top of the deck. Knowing that this Tivar is about to die, I play and minus it and we find a Birds of Paradise in the top 3. Here we then gotta hope that the opponent does not attack the Tivar by any reason and we top deck a Vannifar. It's a lot to ask for and we're looking very hopeless in this spot. The opponent then plays a Master of the Pearl Trident and then attacks us for 6. This is perfect that they had this Lord because they don't want to kill the Tivar as they have us on a 2-turn clock. But like an absolute beast, we rip Prime Speaker Vannifar off the top of the deck with Tivar in play so we can slam that and combo kill the opponent, but not only play around Dismember because of the Giver of Runes. So the opponent does not have a counterspell, the Vannifar hits the table, and we win this game. What a satisfying win, and we win because the opponent did not know we played Vannifar, so there's a big advantage to having the Vannifar combo in the deck because a lot of people just don't know what to play around. Going into game 2, I took out the 4 Giver of Runes and brought in 4 Prismatic Ending because we definitely need them and the Givers are slow on the draw. Going into the second game, our opening hand was almost perfect. The problem is, with the opponent not leaning in on an Aether Vial this game, they just played 2 Lords and just kept bashing in, and it was almost unbeatable for us, especially with a Dismember on our Vannifar. With things not looking good, I brought in 3 Giver of Runes for the third game, and we've just gotta hope that they don't have a lot of disruption. To make things even worse for us though, we have to mulligan our opening 7 and our opening 6, putting us on 5 cards on the play for game 3. This really is not looking good for us. Starting off with a tap land, the opponent has a turn 1 Aether Vial to ramp up their mana. All we can do is play a Coiling Oracle turn 2, which finds us a Giver of Runes. The opponent just ticks up their Aether Vial, plays their land, and passes back the turn. We find a Triome off the top of the deck, so I'm going to play my Giver of Runes and the Triome here, so that we have Restoration Angel next turn. The opponent vials in a Tide Shaper on our end step, which is just a 2-2 that attacks in, and they pass back with 3 mana up. With no Lord in play to give it Island Walk, I decide to pass back to hold up Restoration Angel so that we can try and block. Interestingly, the opponent dismembers the Giver of Runes and pays 4 life. So here I'm going to Restoration Angel to try and save my Giver of Runes because they clearly care about it and have more removal spells in hand. Which they do. The opponent Path to Exiles my Giver of Runes, which not only gets a land out of our deck, but also gets rid of one of their removal spells. As we have 2 blue spells in hand, I get the basic island. From here, we pass back the turn and they have a Master of the Pearl Trident so that they can get in for 3 with a Tide Shaper and they ship back the turn. With their Prime Speaker Vannifar off the top of the deck, the best thing we can do is play that and pray that they have no way to kill the Vannifar. From here, the opponent attacks in for 3 and passes back, but with no 1-drop on the table, we actually don't have a way to get the Corridor Monitor out of the deck, so it makes our combo a bit more awkward. But then I realized we can just straight up sacrifice the Restoration Angel, get the Kiki-Jiki, and we have the Deceiver Exarch in hand to win. But confusingly, the opponent actually had Merfolk Trickster in their hand, and taps the Kiki-Jiki. This is a massive mistake, because they could have tapped my Prime Speaker Vannifar on the upkeep, so I just couldn't activate it at all. Being in an awkward spot, I have to untap the Prime Speaker Vannifar, and I want to get Solitude out of my deck, so that I have access to Kiki-Jiki and Solitude next turn. What's even worse is I now don't have any untappers in my deck that I can easily have access to, so I don't have access to the infinite combo with Prime Speaker Vannifar if they do have a way to disrupt me. After solituding a way to give Island Walk, the opponent finds Dismember off the top of the deck to get rid of the Kiki-Jiki, putting us in a more awkward spot. But with the opponent on 11 and having access to Prime Speaker Vannifar just for value, I play a load of spells from my hand and have Solitude untapped to block and get Extraction Specialist out of the deck so that we have another lifelink blocker, and with the opponent taking a draw step, they concede the game. Overall, I really like this shell, and I think Tivar and Vannifar definitely have some power to be had in the modern format. However, I don't think this list is perfect and definitely needs some tuning if you want to play it yourself and bring it to a tournament. But overall for this video, I think I'm counting this as mission complete.